Good afternoon, everybody. Today we will be speaking about working your way through TPS. It is a general overall informative session regarding temporary protected status. And I am Eloise Ayala. I am the supervising attorney for Legal Aid Service of Collier County at the Immigration Unit. Thank you for joining us. First, I want to start about what temporary protected status is, in short, TPS. I'm sure you have heard it mentioned by TPS only. So TPS, it's when the Secretary of Homeland Security designates a foreign country due to conditions in the country that temporarily prevent the country's nationals from returning safely, or in certain circumstances where the country is unable to handle the return of its nationals adequately. TPS can be granted to those nationals who are already in the United States. So here it mentions that TPS can only be given to those who are already present in the United States, not anyone that's outside of the United States. Usually temporary protected status is only given at a certain date. Therefore, you must have been present in the country in the United States at a certain point in time to be eligible. And that we will talk about that next. So these are the most common countries designated under TPS right now. I have put Haiti, Venezuela, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Syria, and others. And I've listed the other countries who are also currently under TPS. I have focused this presentation on those most common countries, which is Haiti, Venezuela, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Syria. So let's look at Haiti first. So Haiti currently has TPS designated status, and it's good through February 3rd, 2023. Its deadline to register for TPS is also February 3rd, 2023. And I know that sounds a little weird. How is it good through and also you can still register until the last day? Well, this was done so that to allow as many people as possible to join and register. It's expected to be renewed at the end of this period, but that is uncertain, can't be guaranteed, and that depends on the current immigration policy. And you must have been present in the United States on July 29, 2021. July 29, 2021. And means that you were physically present that day here and you have been living in the United States since. For Venezuela, its TPS is good through September 9, 2022. And the deadline to register is also for the same day, September 9, 2022. And again, that's just who was done that way to allow as many people as possible to register. It is also expected to be renewed, but again, it's not guaranteed. It depends a lot on the current immigration law state at that moment. Usually that's decided about a month before the deadline. And for Venezuelan nationals, you must have been present in the United States on March 8, 2021. And again, you must have been physically present that day and continuously resided in the United States since that date. El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Currently, TPS is good as long as an injunction remains. Right now, the old TPS designation is still good because it was its termination was stopped by an injunction from a court. So until that remains, TPS is still good for these three countries. The employment authorization card was automatically extended through December 31st, 2022. So if you're a national from these three countries and your work card shows as expired, it was automatically extended until this date. So it's technically still good. You're not allowed to apply for one if you wish to have another one that shows the new date, but that is optional, not a requirement. And finally, you must have been present in the United States on February 3rd, 2001. There is no registration period for this anymore, as it is not a new designation, but rather it's the designation that was previously in place. So registration period for this is over. This is just applying to those who already have TPS before. Whereas Haiti and Venezuela are new TPS designations, so right now there is an open registration for them. Whereas El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaraguan registration period has been closed, but it's still good. for those who did register on time. For Syria, TPS is good through September 30th, 2022, and the registration closes on September 30th, 2022 also. And you must have been present in the United States on March 19, 2021, and again, have resided since in the United States. Myanmar, Nepal, Somalia, Sudan, and South Sudan do have also TPS designations, but I will not go into their details in this presentation. So what does TPS do for you? What does it do for each person? So let's talk about status. TPS grants a non-immigrant status to the person applying for TPS. It's pretty much saying, well, we're allowing you to stay here temporarily while we can make you go back. In terms of removal protection, it also protects you, and you are not removable from the United States as long as you remain eligible for TPS. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It's definitely possible, but it also protects you from it. So I'll talk about what will make you removable, deportable, if you have TPS towards the end of the presentation. But in general, it is a protection against being removed. Employment authorization and travel document. It does give you an employment authorization card. And it also may make you eligible to obtain a travel document to allow you to travel outside the United States. There's specific parameters in terms of applying for a travel document. And I would advise you to refer to the uscis.gov website for more information regarding travel documents. But in general, TPS holders can have an employment authorization card and a travel document. It does not lead to permanent residence. It does not provide you for a green card. It doesn't matter how long you've had TPS, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever. It does not let you apply for a green card at the end of it all. It's just a temporary status. And it can be terminated. So the designation is given for a certain period of time, and it could be terminated at the end of that period and not renewed. So again, it's not something permanent, it's a temporary status. And again, it may not be renewed, and it also may not be renewed if you have certain bars that make you ineligible. And we'll talk about that next. So the bars that make you ineligible, what does that mean? It means that these factors make you ineligible, and they will likely deny your application unless you show evidence to overcome any of these factors. So the first one is you have been convicted of any felony or 2 or more misdemeanors committed in the United States. So if you have been convicted of 2 or more misdemeanors or of 1 felony, you are now ineligible for TPS. And in that sense, you are not removable. In other words, you are no longer protected from being deported. Number 2, are found inadmissible as an immigrant under applicable grounds under INA Section 212A, including non-waivable criminal and security-related grounds. This really pertains to terrorist activity and that type of scenarios, which is one of the least common ones. But do know that's one of the bars to TPS. You are subject to any of the mandatory bars to asylum. That means that the same bars that apply to asylum apply here. These include, but are not limited to, participating in the persecution of another individual or engaging in or inciting terrorist activity. You fail to meet the continuous physical presence and continuous residence in the United States requirements. That means is you weren't in the United States by the date that is required. And you have not been able to show that you've been living in the United States since then. If your evidence is not adequate, they could find you to fail to meet those requirements. Fail to meet initial or late initial TPS registration requirements. Again, you must register for TPS during the registration period. If you file an application after registration period has closed, they may deny your application. If granted TPS, you fail to re-register for TPS as required without good cause. So once you become a TPS holder, and once that designation is again renewed and extended, you are supposed to re-register for TPS. If you fail to do that, even though you've had TPS before, without showing good cause, you may be found ineligible and be denied. So what is the step for me to apply? So I divided it into 3 different sections. First is the forms, the second is the fees, and the third is the required evidence that you need to submit with your application. Now, please keep in mind that these forms, which you see on your left, the I821, the I765, and the optional I912, each have their own set of instructions, which you're able to find at the uscis.gov website, which I have included the links at the bottom of the slide. So let's talk first about the I821. The I821 is the application for TPS. And the I765 is the application for your work employment authorization card. The optional 912 fee waiver form is an optional form that allows you to request to USCIS that they forgive, that they waive the fee for your application. Usually, you're able to do this if you have low income and you're able to show this through the means of taxes or pay stubs. Please be aware that if you do choose to send a fee waiver with your application and your fee waiver is denied, they'll send the whole package back and then you'll have to resubmit it with the appropriate fees. If this is something you're willing to do, then I encourage you to try to do a fee waiver first, if you believe you're eligible for it. Again, at the uscis.gov website, you will find the form and you will find instructions, and it will also let you know if you qualify depending on your household income. If you wish to not submit a fee waiver, then you should just submit the fees. It's $545 total for a TPS application with the employment card application. This should be submitted in a money order or check, no cash. And it's $135 if you wish to just apply for TPS without a work employment card. Now, what do you need to submit with those 2 forms? What required evidence is a must in your application? So first is your identification documents. That could be your birth certificate, a copy of your passport, an I-94 if applicable. And that means if you entered the United States using a visa, then you have an I-94, and you should include it if that applies. If you came through the border or did not enter with a visa, you may not have an I-94, and that's okay. But if you do have one, you should include it also. And you should include the proof of your continuous physical presence. That means you have to show that you were here on that date that we spoke about in the previous slide, and you will submit documents to show that you've been living in the United States since also. So 2 separate things. You have to show that you were here on that date, and you have to show that you've been living here since that date. And usually the best pieces of evidence are utility bills, lease documents, bank statements, your tax returns, pay stubs, affidavits, school medical records, anything that could be used to show by dates. You know, all these documents have dates. Your bill from August, your bill from March, your bill from January will show that you've been living here under a certain address and your name's on the bill. Those are the types of documents you should be submitting with your application. The more you submit, the better. And again, if you have any questions about any of this, the instructions are on the uscis.gov website. The link is on the slide, and it will specifically tell you exactly all the types of required evidence you can submit. What's the most common bar? Firm resettlement. This is usually the most common issue that makes a person ineligible for TPS, other than criminal background. So what is firm resettlement? Firm resettlement is when an alien is considered to be firmly resettled if prior to arrival in the United States, he or she entered into another country with, or while in that country received an offer from permanent resident status, citizenship, or some other type of permanent resettlement. So I would give you an example. For example, a Haitian national commonly may have traveled to Brazil or Chile and resided there for 2 or 3 years before entering the United States. So has that person firmly resettled in that country, for Brazil or Chile? And that's when an issue of firm resettlement really comes up. If USCIS sees that that's been the case, then the next question is, well, did that person receive an offer of permanent resident status, citizenship, or other permanent status? So for example, if you're a Haitian national who lived in Chile for 2 years, where all you had was just a temporary work authorization card, then you do not have an issue of firm resettlement. Again, it's only when you've been offered a permanent status, like resident status or citizenship. If you became a citizen in Brazil or Chile, then you really have a firm resettlement issue. If, for example, you're a Haitian national, but you have a child in Brazil or Chile, then your child will have an issue with firm resettlement because they are not a Haitian national, they are Brazilian or Chilean nationals. Again, it can get very complicated, and if you feel firm resettlement will be an issue on your case, I encourage you to seek legal advice. How can you overcome firm resettlement in your application? So there are 2 exceptions to the firm resettlement bar. The first is no significant ties. If the TPS applicant's entry into that country was a necessary consequence of his or her flight from the conditions in the TPS country, they remain in that country as long as was necessary to arrange onward travel, and they did not establish significant ties in that country. Or because of restrictive conditions, if the conditions in the non-TPS country were so substantially and consciously restricted by the authority of that country that they were not in fact resettled. So what exactly does this mean? Well, let's talk first about no significant ties. Let's first talk about the first part of it. If the TPS applicant entry was a necessary consequence of his or her flight from the conditions in a TPS country. So let's say you're a Venezuelan national, and in order to get to the United States, you had to stop in Panama. But it was only a short stop. Therefore, there are no significant ties to the country. It was just a short stop. But let's say there's a Venezuelan national who goes to Uruguay and works there for 2 years and has a child there. Was that a necessary consequence of his or her flight from the conditions from the TPS country? And then the second part, they remain in that country as long as was necessary to arrange onward travel. It is very common for our clients to say, well, I went to Chile until I had enough money to be able to go to the United States. That could fall under that. And the third part is they did not establish significant ties in that country. A good example would be of, let's say, a Haitian national who goes to Brazil and stays there for 2 years under the same kind of idea. Well, I need enough money to be able to make it to the United States, and only works for those 2 years. They do not buy a house, they do not buy a car, they do not apply for a status, and they do not make a life in that country. Then you're a good candidate to overcome the firm resettlement issue. Let's look at the restrictive conditions part. If the conditions in the non-TPS country, that is the third country, were so substantially and consciously restricted by the authority of the country that they were not in fact resettled. So we have seen that Haitian nationals in Brazil have been victims of racism and discrimination. This could be a good argument that they were so substantially and consciously restricted in that country that they were not in fact resettled. Again, each case will depend on the facts, but this is usually the 2 exceptions. And if you're looking to overcome the firm resettlement bar, if you think it applies to you, my advice is for you to submit evidence that shows that you qualify under these exceptions. So for example, you could submit an affidavit saying, I did not buy a car, I did not buy a house, I did not marry anyone, I did not seek any public benefits in that country, any reasons why you think you were not firmly resettled, that you didn't make a life in that country. or any evidence that you were there only as necessary. You had a flight stop in that country, or things like that. Or for example, you only had a work permit authorization. You did not receive an offer for permanent status. You never were a permanent resident or a citizen, for example. So those are always good documents that you can show as evidence that you will not have a firm resettlement issue. And again, ultimately, if you have any doubts, if you think this applies to you, my advice is to seek legal advice to someone that can really tell you whether you will be able to overcome this or not. And again, it doesn't apply to anyone who hasn't been in another country between the time they left the TPS country and the time they arrived at the United States. So if you came from Haiti or Venezuela straight to the United States, then that's not a problem. I hope that was clear. Lastly, frequently asked questions I've had recently. And the first one is, can I still apply for asylum? So lots of people come in and they want to apply for asylum. And then they hear about TPS too, and well, can I do both? Or can I only do one? Or what does it mean? So usually you can apply for asylum and TPS at the same time. You could have both things going on if that's in your best interest. Just remember that the same bars that apply to TPS apply to asylum. So if you have a firm resettlement issue, you will probably likely have to overcome that issue in your asylum application also. But yes, you can do both processes at the same time. And it's usually a good thing because TPS will protect you from removal. It will also give you a work card while you wait for your asylum to be processed. Okay, well, will the TPS designation period be renewed after this designation? Well, that's something we do not know at this time. We can only assume. We do assume that both Haiti and Venezuelan designations will be renewed, but that's not something guaranteed. It's only the government who can make the decision, and it's usually not made until close to the time of the designation ending. And can I still be deported? Again, as mentioned previously, usually TPS protects you from removal, but there are circumstances that can make you be placed in deportations. And again, the most common scenario is when a TPS holder has been convicted of 2 misdemeanors or a felony. For example, you were previously pulled over for driving under the influence, and then subsequently you have a driving with a license, for example, that will give you 2 misdemeanors. Again, it requires convictions, 2 misdemeanor convictions, not just arrest, but convictions. If you have any questions regarding whether your criminal background makes you ineligible for TPS or for any other immigration relief, my advice is that you seek legal advice. I wanted to show you, before I go, the USCIS website. Let me make sure I'm sharing my screen. And the instructions to each form. So here you should be able to see the I821 instructions. As you can see, it says instructions for application for temporary protected status. It will let you know exactly if you can apply for this, who's eligible for TPS, and what type of evidence you should submit, and the instructions on filling out the application. And again, you are able to find this at the USCIS.gov website, which I included in the link on that slide. Otherwise, you can also just go to the USCIS.gov website. And I'm going to take you through the steps. This is your USCIS.gov website. This is how it looks. What you want to do is go to Forms, click on All Forms, and you want to scroll down to the I821 form, as I mentioned on the slide. Just keep going until you see 821 right here, application for temporary status. Click on that. There's an option to file online, but it's only for certain people, so be careful. Here you will see forms and document downloads, and you will see the form, which is the I821 form. I'm gonna click on it so you can see how it looks. This is the form you should fill out. It's 13 pages long. Let me go back now. And underneath that form is the instructions to the form. And again, that instruction is really the manual to filling out the application correctly. And same thing for the application for employment authorization. Again, you want to be in the all forms section, and you want to scroll down to the I765. And again, I noted this down on the slide. You will be able to find this information on the slide you saw. You keep scrolling down, and here you will find application for employment authorization. And you want to click on that. You want to scroll down until you see again forms and document downloads. Again, you'll see the form in PDF version, and you will see the instructions for the form. And again, my advice is for you to read the instructions and make a note of what they're saying, what evidence you need to supply, how to fill out the application, and if you're eligible to submit that application. Those are your two main applications for a TPS application. And again, you should submit the evidence I suggested, and it's also written in the slide. And don't forget your fees. And again, if there's any other questions or any other doubts, this is the website where you want to go. You want to go to the uscis.gov, and there's lots of information there. You're also up here in the right corner top. You're also able to translate the website to the language that you understand. So if you speak Portuguese or Creole or whatever you speak, you can have it translated, and it will help you understand the website better. After you submitted your TPS, let me mention something else. Please note also that when you're on the TPS application, and again, that's the I821, you want to make a note of where you should send your applications. So you have your I821, you have your I765, you have your required evidence, and you have your money orders. Now what? Where should you send it to? Again, you want to go to I821. You want to scroll down, and there's a tab where it says where to file. And just look at the instructions of what it says there. You should probably go to the TPS website, as they say. Select the country you are national of. Let's assume, just for general purposes, that you're from Haiti. Scroll down again. Again, look for the where to file tab. And here it is. If you are applying for TPS under the TPS designation for Haiti and you live in Florida or New York, this is where you should be sending your application. If you live in any other state other than Florida or New York, this is where you should be submitting your application. Exactly how it's written here. If you are Venezuelan national, let's say, you should check on the Venezuelan tab on your left side. And again, scroll down to it says where to file. And again, you will see if you live in Florida, this is where you should submit your TPS application. And if you live in any other state, this is where you should submit your application. Okay. So after you submitted your application, there under tools, here at the uscis.gov website, there are USCIS tools and resources. And I want to draw your attention to the case status online link. You can submit that. Once you submitted your application, you will receive a receipt from USCIS saying the type of form you submitted, that they've accepted your application, that they're processing your application, and it will include a receipt number on the top left side of the paper. With that receipt number, you're able to put it in here, just like these look. You're able to check status, and it will tell you the status of your application. It could be that it says your application has been received and it's in process, or it could be your card was delivered to you. For example, your work authorization card. It will let you know where your status of your application is at with USCIS. So let's talk briefly about what happens after you file your application. Again, just as I've mentioned, you receive a receipt saying that they've received your application. It will have your receipt number, which allows you to track your application. And it will tell you what office is processing your application. And that's it. After that, in a few weeks or a month, you should be receiving a fingerprint notice from USCIS. And it will let you know where to go get your fingerprints done and at what time, what day. Please make sure you go and take your fingerprints for every family member who receives a notice. And after that happens, then it's just a waiting period. You should expect your application to take from 6 months up to a year until you receive a grant or a denial. After your fingerprint appointment, you should be either getting an approval notice or your work employment authorization card in the mail. And after that, that's it. Congratulations. I hope that this webinar has helped you. And please make sure to reread the slides, and you'll find again the links there. And if anything, please visit the uscis.gov website where you can find all the information needed. And also remember that Legal Aid Service of Collier County is here and can help you with a process that you may need for immigration. At the moment, our TPS, our intakes are not open to TPS applicants as we are at capacity, but we will make new announcements as it comes and if we're able to. And either way, you're welcome to call our office and make an application for our services. And if we're able to help you, we will. Thank you and have a good day.